Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, and let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to that light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. There is a story of a woman who lived in Mississippi during the 1800s. She was not given a name, but let's call her Carrie. Carrie was poor. Carrie was a slave, but she was deeply rooted in her faith. We are told that the strength of her faith knew no equal. She worked in the fields from sunup to sundown under the driver's lash. We are told that the driver was so proficient with his whip that he could slice any part of a woman's body just as neatly as a doctor could lance a wound. Carrie's faith was the only thing that kept her moving forward from day to day. And her constant prayer was, Lord, help me escape this misery. Lord, if you just assist me in getting out of here, I will sleep with the moccasins. I will endure the swamps and gators. I will starve in the wilderness. But don't let one more day pass that I have to endure having my flesh torn open by this overseer's lash. As the story goes, one night when all around her had settled into a deep sleep, she decided to make her way for that place called Canada, that place she had heard was the land. She packed some clothes and food and a little bundle. She knew she didn't have enough to make the long journey, but she stepped out on faith that she would be delivered somehow. Stepping quietly and carefully, she left the 12-by-16 one-room wattle and daub log cabin they called a quarter and headed for freedom. It didn't take long for her to reach the swamps and the cane brakes that were so common in the Delta region. Sooner than she expected, the hounds began baying at her tracks. Remembering the stories of those who had made it to freedom's soil, she plunged herself into the swamp, and she waited in the darkness, hoping to mask the smell that the accursed hounds could detect miles away. She waded in snake and alligator-infested waters all night. Finally, reaching shore, she stopped to rest at a short while, and then she heard it again. The dogs. They had not lost her scent. They were still pursuing her. Seeing those bloodthirsty dogs filled her with terror. All of the stories about what happened to slaves who had run away and had been victim of these vicious dogs flooded her mind and filled her with doubt. She knew she couldn't run any faster. She knew that her strength was being sapped. She realized that her faith was becoming all too obvious. Her legs and her arms so tired she could hardly put one foot in front of the other. She had to stop. She had to rest. There was no more in her. Physically exhausted, she fell to the ground. But at that moment, something inside of her refused to give up, even as the ferocious dogs barked louder and ran faster, smelling victory, slobbering at the prospect of ripping her flesh to shreds. Even then, she would not surrender. In a state between terror and grace, between hopelessness and doubt, between I can't and maybe I can, that place where faith waits, she bowed down over her bruised knees and began to pray to God. She asked for deliverance. She pleaded for mercy. She petitioned for dominion over her enemies. She asked God to make her dreams a reality, liberate her from the approaching dogs. They were close enough now for her to see the drool from their mouths. She could see their ferocious teeth ready to tear her to shreds. But something happened at that moment. Something told her, reach into your sack. Offer them the few crumbs you have left from your cornbread. The documents tell us that those bloodthirsty dogs stopped in their tracks, licked the crumbs from her hands, and as if commanded by a higher power, trotted off back toward the swamp from which they had emerged. If she needed a sign that she was on the right track, she needed it no longer. She traveled by night, she rested by day. In my mind's eye, I see her leaving Jackson, heading for Yazoo, Mississippi. I imagine her trekking toward the Tallahatchie River, where someone from Clarksdale gives her a meal and shelter to hurry her on her way. By and by, she arrives in Helena, Arkansas, having gotten a change of clothes from an Arkansan heading to Memphis by boat. Linked and long, she makes it to Mayfield, Kentucky, and then on to Paducah, Illinois, and finally to Belleville. Her last stop, Kalamazoo and Jackson, Michigan. I imagine in my mind that all along the way there is someone helping her. Black, white, slave, free. Finally, after months of being alone, not knowing what each day would bring, having left everything and everyone who means something to her behind, finally, she reaches Detroit, where she is ferried across to Windsor and final freedom. A minister who witnessed her arrival in Emmitsburg said when she got there, she fell on her knees, she kissed the shore, and then jumped up and down for a full half hour, praising God for delivering her at last to the land of freedom. What a journey. What a woman. What a time. Carrie was seeking and received what I think we should be seeking as we move into a new century: common ground. Common ground between museums and universities. Common ground between arts agencies and community trusts. Common ground between storytellers of all persuasions and story listeners, whether they're the general public, whether they are members of the academy, whether they are educators or students, because collectively we are the keepers of the master narrative that tells the story of who we are as Americans.